Welcome to Stories from the Pitch, a podcast dedicated to creating a living oral history about street performing and some of the crazy characters who populate this world. I'm Magic Brian, your host for this growing collection of interviews. In this episode, I had the pleasure to talk to the infectious bubble of energy that is Abi Collins. We connected over Skype, so please bear with the quality of the recording. You can also watch the interview on our YouTube channel. As always, I'll have a link for it in the episode notes. In our conversation, Abi told me about how she started as a dancer, got her master's in drama, but discovered her interest in street theater when she saw Stompy performing at her first Glastonbury, then meeting David Cassel there the following year, setting her off on a path to being a street performer. She credits David with teaching her everything she knows about street performing and how he convinced her to write her first show on a train ride from Poland to Belgium. She talks about getting a wake-up call when she first started working the streets in Melbourne, how she offended a crowd with gigantic fake boobs, the value of street theater, her novel, due out in March of 2021, called Everybody's Doing It, and so much more. The conversation is also peppered with some of those great little stories from the pitch that happen when you push the envelope, as Abi has done her whole career. Hi, Abi.
Hi, Brian.
Welcome to Stories from the Pitch.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we've been trying to get you for quite a long time, a number of years. And we were going to do it over Skype like 4 or 5 years ago, but the quality is so shit that we were going to wait till I saw you in person. But now, I don't know when I'm going to see you in person, so we're like, screw it. Yeah. Let's just do it over Skype.
Global pandemic to make it happen.
Yeah. And then also now we have a nice video version, so people can watch us talk.
Excellent.
And see how beautiful you look. Your hair. This hair.
And, getting the old lady neck, so wearing a lot of polo necks these days.
Okay.
Keeping the hands out of you.
Uh-huh.
Either go for the Madonna fingerless gloves or just keep the hands down.
You look great, Abi. So I want to find out your story from how you got started street performing and your journey through it all. I know you have... Yeah, from back to the beginning, like, how did you start? Where did you start? What were you doing? What got you into performing?
Okay, so it's a long story. It's a very long story. It's nearly 50-year long story. Since I was tiny, I danced. And I always loved performing, but I was always very shy. Like I am actually, no one ever believes this, but I'm quite a naturally shy person.
Doesn't show.
And no, I think performers kind of tend to fall into two schools. They're either like gregarious and they're like, look at me because I love you looking at me, or they're like, look at me because I just want to make you feel good, because if you feel good then I'll feel better about myself as a person. And I think I definitely fall into that second category. So I was really painfully shy when I was a kid, but I always loved dancing and putting on accents and doing Shirley Bassey impressions when I was 7 and all sorts of nonsense. And then I was headed to be a ballerina.
How old were you?
So I think I was about 8 or 9, and the Royal Ballet decided, I think the Arts Council, so God, this was back in the 80s, the Arts Council said, getting all this public funding, we should really make ballet more accessible to the people. And so they went around schools, like ordinary schools, auditioning kids to join the Royal Ballet. And so I auditioned. Was running around the school gym in my knickers, pretending to be a swan. And I got through the first round, and I think I got through the second round, and I got to the third round and it crashed out. And I was absolutely devastated. And then there was an amazing ballet teacher, and she picked up all the ugly ducklings and she trained us for a year. And the next year she put us through the audition again, and I got in. But it was horrendous because, back then I was like, I grew up in Dagenham, which is kind of sort of like part of Greater London, quite rough, ready, very working class, blue collar, which I'm very proud of. But, there's me doing me ballet, I'm doing me ballet, doing me pliés and stuff. And, everybody was like, they were terribly, terribly toffee-nosed there. And they were awful to me. They were absolutely awful to me. The first day of ballet class, they measured everybody up for the official Royal Ballet leotard and ballet shoes. And they got to me and they went, "You're okay." And on they moved. And I was like the only kid. Oh my God, it was like Orphan Annie.
Really?
I was the only kid in the class who didn't have the official.
Why would they do that?
I have no idea. I mean, obviously it's changed a lot now. It's, not as elitist as it was. So anyway, after 3 months of going there, I said to my mum, I don't like it, Mum. I don't want to go anymore. And she's like, yeah, scrub round it, babe. And now I'm like, Mum, why did you say scrub round it? Royal Ballet. I could have been a contender. I could have been. Yeah. So that was the end of, it wasn't the, I carried on dancing. I did gym at school, and then even though I was really shy, I couldn't quite kick the performance thing, and I went through my schooling. Then I went to kind of like a tertiary college before university and studied drama, and we got into the national drama competition, which was quite a big deal.
Wow.
I got a special mention from the judge. We didn't get anywhere, but and then I went to university and studied drama, and really all I wanted to do was perform, but I veered towards the academic side more because I thought I'll never get a job as a performer.
Did you want to be an actress in the stage, or?
Yeah, I mean, I never said that's what secretly it was what I wanted, but I never said it's what I want. I just didn't have the balls, didn't have the gumption to do it.
But you want to be a performer of some sort.
Yeah, but I was like wrestling between this like gregarious, oh God, I love entertaining people. I love making people laugh. I love I love pleasing people. Don't take that the wrong way. And feeling like that, but also feeling just really nervous and shy. And I've had problems with anxiety my whole life. So it was really like, it's kind of like Fight Club.
Yeah.
I was Tyler Durden. I was like beating myself up. I want to be out there. I'm too shy. And from after I did my bachelor's, I went on and did a master's. But I sort of, was on the periphery of festival culture, and I went to Glastonbury and I saw Stompy.
Stompy. Oh, yeah, Stompy, of course.
And so one of the things that first got me into street performing was seeing Stompy. There were these lads walking across Glastonbury, and Stompy was walking behind them, following and totally taking the piss. And I thought, oh my God, look, people will applaud if you take the piss out of someone. So I thought that was brilliant. And
now, did you go to Glastonbury to just see it, or were you part of a group or something?
I was doing a little bit of walkabout stuff. I was doing this sort of I'd got a ticket in, no fee, but I'd got a ticket in, and I don't even know how it happened now. I met up with this guy, and we decided to do this partly political walkabout. It was when the Criminal Justice Bill, which was a thing in British law, which totally changed the complexion of British law. It was kind of like the beginning of the end of our civil rights. We don't have like civil liberties in this country, and it basically. So there'd been the rave culture in the UK, and the right to gather, which also affects us as street performers. And, and it was sort of like with the privatisation of public space and that kind of stuff. So I met this guy, and we just literally threw this walkabout together where we were walking around and saying, vote for injustice at the next election, vote for injustice as a vote for tax cuts, benefit cuts and haircuts, vote for injustice. Because it was Glastonbury, and everybody's so solid. People were like, fuck off. We were two Tory MPs. So I really enjoyed doing that. And then I did my master's degree, and the next year I went back, and with a group that I've been working with in Bristol, I'd moved to Bristol in the West Country by then, and did a sort of like trapeze fire show thing. And there was a group called the Tofu Love Frogs, and they were like a kind of anarchist punk folk band, and they asked a bunch of us to get on stage. Yeah, they're brilliant. Well, Chris Tofu now, like he runs an agency. I think he's an OBE now. Anyway, we got on stage and we did a dance to with one of their songs about police arresting people, and there were loads of hippies spaced out in the front row going, "Oh, don't get off stage, leave them alone," because they thought we were real policemen.
So you seem like in the beginning times you just tried to do things that really upset other people, played characters that played with that.
Yeah, I guess so. For someone who sort of likes pleasing people, but also I'd always, my family are quite left wing, and I think I come from sort of like a family agitated. So even though I liked pleasing people and I was shy, I still liked pushing people's buttons.
Yeah.
So also that year, they needed someone to jump on at the outside circus stage. They said, "Oh, one of the acts hasn't turned up. Can you go on?" And I just brought a bag of stuff with me. So I put on this like tragic 1980s workout outfit, and I just went out and created this character, and I had everybody laying on their backs
You
on
just made
Sunday
it up on the
morning.
spot?
The clock, and like doing leg presses, and I was walking around going, "Oh, you've not washed your knicker since Thursday, have you, love?" And it just
So you just improvised the whole character, the whole thing?
Yeah, just went out there and improvised and played with people. And also that year I met David Cassel, who Hotcha Schmarzinski, and it was kind of love at first sight, and he just said, "Come away with me."
What year was that?
Oh my God, when was that? 1995?
Wow.
I want to say 95. I think 95, yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, "Come away with me. I'll teach you how to do a street show." And I went, "Yeah, okay." I'd finished my master's degree. And so I just back to Bristol, packed up some stuff and went, "Right, I'm off to Europe for the summer."
Wow.
And then travelled around Europe with him, watching him do street shows. And he taught me everything I know about street performing. It was like street theatre 101. This is what you need to do to build a crowd. This is how you keep a crowd. This is how you can put a street show together. This is how you should pass the hat. This is when you should do the hat pitch. And so I flew out to Prague and met him, and then we took an overnight train from Prague to Belgium, because he was going to the Feesten Festival. And on the train, he's like, right, Abby, write a street show." And I was like, right. And I'd thrown a tutu in my bag, a pair of point shoes. And so overnight on the train from Prague to Belgium. Yeah,
you wrote a show.
Madame Chouchou's Fire on the Nile, and I'm going to be a ballet diva, and then I'm going to get people out of the audience, and they're going to be the corps de ballet, and there's going to be a love interest. And then I got to Ghent and got out on the street and did the show. And when I first started, I had real beginner's luck. I think it was just, the adrenaline driving me forward, and also because, as you know, Ghent Festival is because it's the history of the festival. It's a medieval festival, so it's literally that carnival culture and spirit, and anything goes. And never forget Miss Minetti, breaking up bits of wood, and we all had a fire on the street at 3:00 in the morning. Anywhere else in the world past, police would tell you to quit it, wouldn't they? But in Ghent, it's like, oh yes, these people are having a fire on the street. It's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
So I started the show there, and then we went to Avignon Festival, and of course, because it was Avignon, it was France, home of ballet. There's me doing my ballet on the street, and oh, wonderful. And then
was your show in English? Was it silent? What else did you have in it?
In Belgium, but when I got to France, I did it in French because I'd learned French at school.
Okay. So Belgium, you said it was in English?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was why I think I'd real beginner's luck in the beginning. I was making massive hats, and I was like, God, this is brilliant. Why did I bother all that education?
Yeah.
And then I didn't do that many shows because David had a tour schedule, so I sort of travelled around with him, and I was his roadie. And then at the end of the summer, we went back to Australia because that's where he was living at the time.
Wow.
And that's when my busking properly started, and I was like, oh my God. Are we fair on this?
That was what, 96?
This was still 95.
It was still 95. So you did a tour of Europe, and then you went to Australia.
Yeah, and so I did a few street shows. I did Ghent Festival, and I did Avignon. I think maybe Heidelberg, maybe Munich. But I did very few shows. But I had a warped idea of what street theatre was, I think, and because I came from a sort of theatre dance background as well, I was like, oh, you can do anything on the street, It's like,
you could.
Well, yes, but until I got to Australia.
Oh yeah, I know. That's different. It's a whole different animal.
Oh my God! When I got to Australia, I was like, crash and burn because, you know, suddenly it was like proper busking, going to the pitch in Melbourne, and then, you know, people just like, you know, the weather in Australia, midsummer, boiling hot, and then just, so I guess, you know, British culture is not Australian culture, you know, like British culture is not American culture, it's not Canadian culture, and it took me a long time to kind of get used to being in Australia. And also, like, when I got there, I guess I found it quite sort of hard, and, you know, so turning up at the pitch, and there were, you know,
who was there?
Richie Rich, Lucky Rich, yeah, Anthony Living Space. So I don't know if Sam Fish was there at the time, but, you know, so kind of like a lot of big generic shows as well. And so, you know, there's me with my ballet shoes and like 6 foot giraffe unicycle. And nobody wanted to watch me.
Yeah, of course.
And David kept saying to me, like, you know, why don't you use you know, use this skill. And I was like, no, I don't want to use that. Like, everybody's doing that. And he's like, yeah, everybody's doing it because it works.
Yeah.
And I'm so resistant. I mean, looking back, I hope I never offended anybody, because I think I was probably a right little snob up my own arse.
Really?
You know, because I had a master's degree in theatre. I mean, you know.
Right, you're like, what am I doing this? I'm not going to juggle things.
Exactly. I was like, why don't you like ballet and you don't like Shakespeare? What the hell is wrong with you people? I think it, you know, in looking back, it did me a massive favour, because whatever I've done since then, it's really taught me how to, I think, you know, you see, because I do more cabaret now, but I think, you know, when you move from doing street theatre, you do cabaret theatre, whatever else you do, you can really tell who's had a bit of a grounding in doing stuff on the street, because that immediacy you get with the street, and being able to keep a crowd, being able to talk to people and not talk at people.
Yeah. And sound real.
Yeah, sound real, and to be genuine with people. It really, even though, like, I've always done characters, and I still play characters now when there's not a pandemic on and I get to actually do some shows.
Yeah.
But I think it really, I'm learning like timing and learning how to keep a crowd and keep people engaged, and also the edge that the street gives you, because I think now my performance style will change. I'm probably going to stop licking people.
Yeah, I would imagine that's got to get cut out.
Kind of climbing, using a lot of audience participation and climbing on people and getting really, like, not in a sexual way. I mean, I guess a bit really like people. That will probably change now, because, I mean, it just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's hard to know what's going to feel right for everybody.
It's tragic, but in terms of what I was doing with cabaret stuff pre-pandemic, it really the stuff that I did on the street, that I always did from the very beginning, which was literally putting my bum in someone's face, and not for the sexual thing, for the thing of like, pushing the envelope, you know, really, like, just to see, you know, doing the things that weren't acceptable, and especially doing things that weren't acceptable as a woman.
Yeah, of course. That was always great about your energy, is that you have that kind of, it's almost like attack mode. You know, it's like what you're saying, like you did, like the early shows you did in Glastonbury, where you're playing with this idea of, you know, egging people on, and, you know, and you're very energetic and physical. And I think that's what's really cool, is like, you're a smaller woman, you're not a big giant, but you project a giant person. You know what I mean? Like, your characters are really strong and really outgoing and forceful, but also playful and lovable.
I think I made a lot of mistakes when I first started performing. You know, like Jonathan Kay, the British clown, like he says, always put the audience back where you found them at the beginning. And I think when I first started off, I was definitely guilty of not returning people to their natural emotional habitat. And I really hate to think of the people that I may have scarred. I still feel guilty about it because I used to. So with the Fire on the Nile show, you know, I used to get a guy out to be my love interest, to be Antony to my Cleopatra, and the whole thing was David was so good with all this stuff because he was like, push the envelope, Abby, like push it if you're going to do it. And the whole thing was can I get the man out of his trousers down to his underpants and into ballet tights and a tutu? And for me, I mean, God, I look back now and just think I was so much more focused on that than the money or anything else. It was like a hat. And I think because of my insistence on that I may have really pushed it too far in the beginning because I was so green and just not sensitive enough with people. And I did, and a lot of the time though, I think I upset men's partners, girlfriends and wives. I think I upset wags more than that, because sometimes I'd see the guys walking away with the wife going, the thing with the tights as well, though, is it backfired on me a couple of times. I was doing a show really early in the morning in Australia because the TAFEs, the colleges there, they'd have like freshers weeks and the kids would be pissed at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I went to college one day to do like a welcome week show. And so I get the guy out and everyone's having a really good time. And I say to him, okay, take your board shorts on, take your shorts off and put these on. And he went, oh, love, can't do it. And I was like, go, take them off. He's like, I don't have any underpants on. Sorry, as Shay was saying, I don't have any undercrackers on. And I went, shit, and everybody started laughing, and it was like, oh. Always stand in front of the guy, and he'd stand behind me to put the. So he's standing behind me, and he literally takes his pants off. He takes his sports shorts off, and he's naked. And I've got a big tutu on, so I flap up the tutu, and I don't mean anything funny by it, but of course I flap up the tutu, and he's kind of holding onto my waist. And he was like a rugger guy, he was a great big guy, so he pulled the tights on, and I heard him rip as they go up, and he just about manages to pull them up, and he puts the tutu on, and then we do this pas de deux thing where we're running and jumping. But every time he jumps, the tutu flapped up. He's got this giant butt crack shot of So that was one of the better misfiring incidents. But definitely over the years, I learned how to be more gentle with the audience, and also the art of kind of saying no, and the art of releasing people, that if I saw somebody that they were really having a bad time, I would send them. Yeah.
So those early days in Melbourne, how much did your show change? Because you clearly went from being in Europe to this really hard pitch in Melbourne, and you have to do something different, right? How long did you resist trying to adjust your show?
I think it took me about 2 years. I was really resistant, and I suffered because of that. Because obviously, like in Europe, especially if you do more festivals and you're on the European circuit, the festival circuit, you've got people, juggling balls with white face and
it's all artistic.
And you do, that you don't need that big rah, here's my prop.
Yeah.
So I was really resistant, and then slowly, like, I'd put in some hat lines that David would suggest, and or I'd put in a couple of stock jokes, and then the people would be laughing and clapping, and I'd be angry at the audience
because they're laughing at things that are funny.
Well, yeah, but from back then, for me at the time, I was like, how can you laugh at this joke? You've just had 5 other performers do it. And then I got this like real kind of contempt on for the audience. And I look back and I really kind of like hate myself. But I think it was all more about me being conflicted because, I grew up like in a as a working class kid growing up, and then I went to university, so I'd never felt like I fitted in at home. I never felt like I fitted in at university. It wasn't until I discovered street performing that I really felt I'd found my tribe, because we're such a band of miscreants and misfits from all over
everywhere.
Yeah, and so and you know, your class, gender, race, even beliefs to a certain degree don't matter in our crew. It's just like, you are who you are. Just come along, don't be a dick.
Pretty much.
Fine. So I think that was, you know, it was me, hating on the audience for a bit, and it really took me maybe a long time not to be such a, I don't know, I want to say bitch. I wasn't a bitch, but I was just so conflicted and not wanting to. I suppose I saw it art, and I didn't feel like, I don't want to compromise myself as an artist.
I think that's fair. What's that?
I was so up my own butt.
Yeah, but I think that's fair. Like not just following the, like Silver always called it, like paint by number, not just following the exact formula. Like, I think is good. It's just now there's such a tight formula that it's hard to create a show outside of that if you're just doing pure street, because also people's attention spans are so short, and especially Australia back then would be the same. They're just, you know, like you said, arms crossed. Like, what are you going to do? What can you show me? So to try to be artistic in that setting is really challenging.
And I wonder, because I've not busked for a long time. I've done a few festivals where it's been kind of like hat passing, and then you feel like, oh, this is a little bit like street used to be, but it's not really, is it? Because people are coming for the festival, they're there, and it's usually quite arty places and arty communities. But I do wonder now that if you're busking, if the whole kind of like, you know, Instagram, the TikTok culture, how that is affecting street shows, because you're right, everybody's got this like.
Oh yeah, they got the phone in their hand. What was that last part?
The 3-second fishbowl memory, you know.
Yeah.
They're gone.
And they have the device in their hand. They sometimes watch the show through the device because they're recording you. Yeah, it's very different. But
why do people do that? You just go like, what do they do? They go home and go like, you know.
Are they ever going to watch it again?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, is it like the modern day equivalent of people taking their holiday snaps and putting them on the projector, and so they invite their neighbours around to see this really cool street performer?
I think what they do is they record it so they can post it and say that they were there watching this person do this thing.
Yeah.
But going back to
again, do they?
Yeah, going back to your Melbourne days, you said you were there. How you said it took you 2 years? So were you just in Melbourne the whole time, or did you go on tour with David in the summers?
We toured around. We do, you know, the festival circuit in Australia, which, as you know, is actually not that big. It's kind of like between 5 cities, and you know, we'd go to Sydney, and I have to say, busking in Sydney was totally different to busking in Melbourne.
How so?
Oh God, Darling Harbour, quite.
Oh yeah, it's pretty harsh. Yeah.
And it was kind of like, it was Lucky in Melbourne, wasn't it? And it was like Forest in Sydney. And I was terrified of Lucky, and I was terrified of Forest.
Yeah.
And
did they welcome you though at all? Did you feel welcome on the pitch?
Yes and no. I think there weren't that many girls around.
Who else was around?
Well,
Tamara?
In terms of, no, she was based in Sydney. And like in Melbourne, sometimes I would often be the only woman on the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And well, then, like, you know, it was great when Sharon came down.
Oh yeah.
And if I went to a festival, there'd be more women, but you know, often there really wouldn't be that many women around. But I never really felt like that was necessarily the problem. I always felt it was more kind of like the style of show that I was doing.
Yeah.
And that, you know, because I didn't have like a big trick, even though I think, you know, doing the splits on the shoulders of 2 complete strangers is pretty reasonable as a trick, and certainly dangerous. I think people just, didn't quite realise the level of risk involved in it. But yeah, no, I sort of felt welcome. But then, as you know as well, like with the busking, it's dependent on how many people are on the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
There's always, it's weird, isn't it? It is like a family, because there is a degree of camaraderie, but there also is kind of like friction and fighting, and I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but there would always be some drama.
Yeah, not everyone gets along with everybody.
Some disagreement and performers running over their time, and then there'd be like other things with the city regulations and infringements and pitches getting moved or pitches getting smaller. I mean, I remember a lot of bureaucracy around it, and actually that's something that's followed me to London as well. That thing between the public and the private space. I think what most citizens don't realise is how much of their city is actually private land.
Yeah.
Like here in London, the City of London, so much land is privately managed, and what you think of as a public thoroughfare is not public at all. It's quite worrying, really.
Yeah. Did you ever work Covent Garden?
I have never worked Covent Garden. Can you believe that?
Yeah, not that surprised. I mean, if you were in Australia for a while and touring Europe.
Well, I've been back in London since, when did I come back? Late 2008. I finally came back to the UK properly and settled here. But by that time, I'd started doing kind of cabaret stuff as well. And
yeah,
I got to be honest, I just never had the balls to do Covent Garden.
You never had the balls to do the Covent Garden after you worked Sydney and Melbourne?
Yeah,
it's because it's your home pitch, probably, right? It feels different.
Yeah, maybe that, and also like I mean, it's hard work, isn't it? Street performing, like, as well. And if you've got to hang around at the pitch all day and go to the draw, it's a job. I think it's what the general public don't understand, is that busking and street performing it's an art, it's a job, it's a skill, it's like any other small business, and you've got to put the time in. And so for working Covent Garden, that means going to the draw and hanging around, and yeah, maybe I'm just lazy.
No, not at all. So you're in Melbourne for how long did you stay in Melbourne?
We lived there David had been there for a long time before I arrived, and we were there for sort of like 8 to 10 years, and then we started to spend more and more time in Europe, and sort of like transitioned back, and there was kind of like sort of a 2 or 3 year period where I didn't really live anywhere. And David and I went our separate ways, and then I just was kind of like, I was sort of stateless, just mooching around, and eventually I decided to come back to the UK after that.
So in that time of when you were traveling around, and were you mostly doing street, or when did you start doing festivals? What was the point of like street, and then street theater festivals, and then off to cabaret?
I'd always done festivals, because when I met David, he was already doing festivals, and he won quite a fair few awards and stuff, so he was always doing a mixture of street and festivals. And then the work that we did in Australia, we did educational theatre, we did a tour of a children's show. David had set up this brilliant facility called the Rumpus Room. It was did you ever come to
no
this is big old beautiful red brick warehouse, and David turned it into this incredible live workspace. And there was the juggle shop was next door. It used to be a weekly juggle jam on a Wednesday night, and other people would teach classes there, and we'd put on cabarets and stuff. So it had already started back then. And then David and I did a show together called Sid and Lena, this washed up showbiz couple. It was like a kind of cheesy Vegas pastiche.
Yeah, that's that's when I met you. It was in Adelaide, I think 2004. And I think I met you guys there, and I did a spot in that show.
Yes, you did.
Was that White for it?
Yeah. David had like kind of 1970s porno moustache, and he had a fake hairy chest, and all the costumes are really kind of like tragic-y, goldy glitter. So we did that. So my show, and I even though I bust it, I never had the confidence to push my show as a solo performer. I just didn't have any confidence in myself. And so David and I started doing the show together. So we focused more on that. Mm-hmm. And then when we split, it's like, oh my God, the ground's coming up at me, because, you know, David and I had this partnership where, you know, we sort of had our separate jobs. And so once I was out on my own, I didn't know how to edit video. I had a rough idea of how to use Photoshop, and I sort of had component parts, bits of the kit, but I didn't have the whole kit. And so then I had to learn how to put it all together and to really like push myself. And I got a few festival bookings, and then that snowballed. And then there were a few really good years where I was working. I started to work a lot in Spain, and I worked from the Spanish season starts really early. So I was kind of working from February right through to October, November.
And only festivals in Spain.
Only festivals.
And in Spanish you did your show?
Yeah, I learned the whole show by rote in Spanish.
Wow.
So by then I'd started to do a different show called Femme Expose, mm-hmm. And it was about this Russian character who gets, Soviet circus performer who gets shot out of the cannon the day that Chernobyl, the reactor explodes. And so she loses all of her comrades in the accident, and she stands naked in your city, and she's lost her lover, she's lost the circus, but the show must go on. And so I used to start it out as a bag lady with these like awful teeth and really decrepit, and bless my dad, he came to see me do that show, and I went up to him and I looked at him and I was like, I used to have a plastic bag full of blow up air, neck pillows. Uh-huh. So a big sound, but it didn't hurt when I looked at my dad and I whacked him, and I was like, whack, 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 and he was looking at me like, it's this mad woman, this mad woman's hitting me. He didn't recognize me, and he said to me afterwards, I was like, oh, just my luck, I couldn't believe it, I thought, is this mad old bag going to ruin her show? My dad back though, because my dad used to be Santa Claus at my school, and I didn't recognize him. And then the third year he did it, I looked at his eyes and I was like, that's no. Now I found out that Santa Claus doesn't exist. Yeah. By the way, Santa Claus does exist. I'm just saying that. So yeah, I started doing that show. So I just, I would write the script, translate the script, get friends to help, and learn the whole show in Spanish, and would do the whole show. And then at the end, people would be coming up speaking to me in Spanish, and I'd be like, sí, because I would have no idea what they were saying. I'd just be, oh, sí, claro. And then I did learn to speak Spanish badly eventually. I mean, I had a bit of a head start because I speak French.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I went to Brazil, so I translated the whole thing into Brasileiro. When I went to Japan,
when you were doing this Russian character in Spain, speaking Spanish, were you doing it with a Russian accent? I wouldn't even know how to even approach that.
No, I tried. I don't think I did. I think oh God, I think it was just me trying to speak Spanish. I think I can't remember if I tried or not. Yeah, wasn't
that the show you did in Stockholm? We did the festival with Torsten.
Yeah.
I don't remember the bag lady. I remember you were Russian. Your Russian character.
Well, this was the thing as well. So, because obviously, like, I started out as this, like, the teeth were, do you remember the teeth were horrendous, like, proper, like, tombstone teeth. And so this was where I learned to compromise, but also in a way it upset me that I sometimes would start off as the bag lady, and people, would be like, because they're looking at me, and I thought, God, you have feel sorry for homeless people, thinking this is the kind of crap they get off the people every day. I can take this costume off. They can't. But sometimes it would give me a hard start to the show, because the whole thing was like I'd go inside this like sort of changing room thing, and I'd come out as my former self.
Yeah.
In skimpy, tight little red, Soviet-inspired outfit. And being the bag lady, it could make the start of the show, depending where I was, it could make the start of the show really hard. So sometimes, you know, I'd learn to compromise. Sometimes I was like, oh God, I didn't need this hard start to this show. So sometimes I would start in the hot pants and you know, the little leotard, because it made the start of the show a lot easier. So
yeah,
I'm a little bit horrified that I did that, because he's obviously playing into a stereotype and a hook to get people to watch the show is like, look at my butt.
Yeah.
But I didn't make the world. But now I work and do a lot of cabaret and burlesque nights. And so the one thing I've never had a problem with is, like sexuality on display, or wearing a tight costume, or people admiring your physique.
Yeah.
There is definitely an argument to say, oh well, it's a cheap way to tits and ass. It's a cheap way to get people in. But I'm like, well, but then it depends what you do with that thing, because
exactly.
When I did my academic work, I did a lot of stuff on carnival theory, and carnival theory is the idea that you turn the world upside down. And this is why I've always loved street theatre and festivals, because it's a liminal space where the accepted mores and behaviour of society. This is why people love street performers, because we don't comply to those ordinary. It doesn't mean we're kind of like criminal anarchists, but there is.
Yeah.
Even in the nicest, sweetest show, I think there's still that degree of anarchy, of being outside the normal world of society. So for me, the carnival theory is, and I did write my master's dissertation on this, the idea of turning the world upside down and doing what is not expected. So this is a big segue, but during the medieval period, during the carnival times, so sort of like, the priest would run around the church naked, throwing shit. And there was the thing of like king for a day, so the pauper could be the king for a day, and it was literally the norms of society. And I guess if you look at it, it was a way of, it's like a safety valve on society, or let the poor people have some fun, and then we'll put them back on them, if you want to look at it from a materialist Marxist dialectic. God, this has got boring, hasn't it?
I never heard of this carnival theory thing, though.
Well, yeah, there's if in the churches of medieval churches in the UK, there were carvings, profane carvings underneath the church, the seats. They were called the misery cords, of women filleting the devil and all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, right. So, and there was the idea of like the woman being on top. So obviously in the medieval period, women have no rights. Mm-hmm. And so woman being on top literally was banned. So for me, in my own little way, it sounds really egotistical, but it's been about me literally, standing on two guys. It's been about me being on top. And I hope that if I had left any kind of legacy whatsoever or made any kind of change, was to show little girls that they could be strong, that they could wear whatever they wanted to wear and not be touched or groped. You can be strong. Well, I hope you can be strong. You could be sexy, or you could be womanly. You could be funny. You could be intelligent. It wasn't one thing or the other. Mm-hmm. And I've had some flack because of it over the years.
What do you mean?
That so when I first started performing, actually, I don't know if this was the first year I was performing in Ghent, some bloke carried me out of the circle, literally, so I'd climbed on him.
Yeah.
It was hilarious and he walked off down the street with me. My heart started to thump because I was terrified.
And the audience didn't do anything?
No, they were, oh, it's so funny. It's so
funny. That was part of the show.
And then I started to kick him, and then I got my thighs, and I was clapping my thighs around his ears, like whacking his head to make him let me go, and eventually he let me down. I was scared. And then another time a man said to me, oh, why are you humiliating on yourself on the street? My friend's got a lap dancing club. I can get you a job if you want. which was wrong on so many levels, because actually, you know, I don't have a problem with lap dancing clubs. I don't have a problem with sex work, you know, but that was clearly not what I was doing.
Yeah, and also his intention was putting you down, essentially.
Yeah, and then, you know, it's sort of like, you know, you could get flack from other women, or, you know, you have to make a choice. You can't be sexy and funny. It's like, well, can't you be both?
You can be anything.
And not that I'm sexy, because I never thought of myself as being sexy. I thought I was, you know, it wasn't pornographic, it was cornographic. It was like corny jokes and, you know, bad puns and when I started to do cabaret and burlesque, it's like, then it's more, you know, the opposite to street theatre. It's more women than men. It's completely world. But, you know, I've had people coming, you know, like we all do, people coming up at the end of the show and saying thank you. And actually, I've had a few mums coming up with their daughters, bringing their daughter. It always amazes me, because then I'm like, oh my God, was this, you know, is this okay? Is this family content? But people bringing their daughters up, and women bringing their daughters up. And the one thing that I really enjoy when I'm doing a show, and this is again one thing I learned to get better at, was that when I brought a man up on stage, was to look at his partner and to always be like, you know, this is a joke between you and me, isn't it? We've got him up, and isn't it funny that we're having a little thing between us about him? So I learned to be much more inclusive and much more to build a rapport with the female members of the audience. And
I think those little things, I think, is what you discover from doing all the shows. You're like, oh, if I just do this one little look, this is gonna make nothing. It will make it so much less awkward at the end.
Yeah, and it's surprising, isn't it, in that kind of context of the street where the energy can be quite sort of dissipated. It's quite interesting that you can
focus.
Yeah, and another wonderful thing that David taught me was, you know, he wrote a book, The Pavement Stage, and actually, you know, if anybody wants to learn how to do street performing, though, there's a whole section in that book that is like Street Performing 101.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's in the section of the book, you know, it is a really good how to make a street show, the nuts and bolts of it. And he had this thing that he called anchoring. I don't know what anybody else calls them or what you call them, but just that thing of finding 4 or 5 people in the audience from the very beginning, and they're the ones that you bring in, and they're the ones you focus on, and you try and learn their name, or you keep making a joke that you bounce off of them. And from that, everybody else comes along because they want to join the party and they want to be part of that feeling. And that is something that I've used to this day and still use. And it's been, you know, for doing cabaret and theatre.
For everything, yeah.
Anything where it's live and there's no fourth wall. But actually, I think even, you know, I think a lot of more traditional stage performers could really benefit from the knowledge of street performers, because being able to look out beyond the fourth wall and actually catch somebody's eye and make them feel drawn in. Because otherwise, if you're not going to do that, why just do television?
Yeah. I think, I mean, I definitely, I started on stage, and I definitely, once I started street performing, everything I did became stronger. Like you were saying earlier, your background in drama was a good start, but once you started street performing, you really learned the craft in a different way. And I think that I've heard that from other performers, that, like Sharon we're talking about, I remember she was saying years ago, because when she had started doing stand-up, is that she's like, stand-up is easy compared to street performing. She goes, I'm a good stand-up because I'm a good street performer, because I was a street performer, or am a street performer. And she talks about these comics putting down street performing. She goes, it is so much harder to do a show on the street than it is to be in this club and stand on the stage. And I think that a lot of people know that, you know, if you put your time in on the street, it really helps you develop in a different way, different muscles as a performer.
Yeah, I really, when you go to Edinburgh, you can really see it, can't you? Because you've got all these drama students or people doing shows indoors that say, oh, just go on the street. I mean, all you have to do is set up, and then it's like, oh my God, it's so painful. Why are you shouting at these people? Why are you running after that person when they clearly don't want to watch? You do realise that's bordering on assault.
I know, it's horrible. All this drama students standing there, their poses, holding the flyer out in a frozen pose. I'm like, why is that a thing every year? Every year, there's some group of kids standing frozen on the high street with a flyer in their hand, or they're laying down on the pavement, holding their arm up with a flyer. This doesn't work. No one's going to go to your show. It's insane.
But bless them, and there's definitely, there's definitely there's room for that.
Yeah, but I did want to know how many different characters you have performed on, or how many different shows have you created on the street?
Okay, so there was Madame Chouchou in Fire on the Nile, Madame Chouchou. And then there was Lena Lame at the Sid and Lena show, All That Glitters. And then there was Katinka from the circus. And then there was Angel from my Bada Bing, my butterfly show. And then briefly I did a show called Vive l'amour, which I did in a French accent. And then the last street show that I put together was about Brexit. And I started that show dressed as an English gent with a little moustache and a bowler hat. And it was called Full Britannia. And I started with that. And then I served tea on my head, tea for two and do for tea, and it was all very British. Oh my God, I did that show in Belfast at the Festival of Falls there.
Oh, great.
I've been to Northern Ireland and nobody ever told me what it would mean to whip out the Union Jack in Northern
Ireland. Ooh, yeah. No one told you?
Oh my God, yeah, I was lucky to get out there alive. But I have to say, my God, what an incredible festival and amazing people. And so in that show as well, that the national anthem comes on and that morphs into the Sex Pistols version. And then I do there's always a little bit of striptease in my show. Oh God, I don't care, whatever. And so I stripped down to like an acid wash Union Jack t-shirt, and I put on this like mohawk wig, and then when in Belfast when I did the punk thing, people were like, yeah, because I didn't know this either, but punk had been a massive thing in Northern Ireland, during the Troubles. It really united the Catholic and the Protestant youngsters, and it had been really, so yeah, all's well that ends well. So yeah, and then I do this hula hoop routine to the Sex Pistols, and I don't think I'll ever be doing this routine again because I was spitting. And you know what else I didn't realise? I thought everybody knew punk. So when I did this in Northern Ireland, people were cracking up because it's God Save the Queen. And I never realised how dehydrating it would be to spit constantly.
Yeah.
Routine. So I was like spitting, gobbing. And sometimes spitting on myself. Obviously doing this again, it's not COVID safe at all. But I did the show in Holland, and apparently like in small Dutch villages punk and small Belgian villages punk didn't really make it.
Wow. You just got blank stares.
Is this an English thing? She's spitting? It is horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny when you find those moments when you're in another country and you're like, oh, this doesn't work here at all. Oops.
Yeah, right. But yeah, this didn't get, like 40 towers in Germany. So Full Britannia, that was the last thing that I put together for the street.
So when do you think the last time you've done like a street festival was?
So the last time I did a street festival was 2000 hat passing, or I did some street shows in 2019. So I did a long contract in Copenhagen from August 2019 until the start of the pandemic, and then I got
recently. I thought it's been a while since you've done anything. I thought you were saying cabaret and
So that was an indoor like a cabaret show.
Oh, okay.
But before that, I'd done a few festivals, kind of sort of smaller things, you know, a couple of sort of street gigs that you know, was more like local community things.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I did a really nice festival. Oh God, I want to say Ashford, somewhere in the Midlands, north of England.
Ashburn?
Yeah, Ashburn. Yeah. So that was,
Is that Bill Ferguson's festival?
yeah, Bill. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that was street. That was like, you know, I can't remember if we passed that out or not. That's terrible that I can't remember if we passed that out, isn't it? But yeah, that's probably the last time I did anything close to a street festival.
And
so almost 18 months.
Yeah. Do you miss having those festivals, or you just enjoy doing cabaret more?
I really liked doing a mix of it, and obviously I really liked pre-Brexit was being able to nip over to Europe, and sometimes I would go and do a festival in Holland, and I'd go there and back in a day.
Wow.
To get the first flight in the morning, and then I'd get on a train. Oh my God, once I fell asleep on a train and woke up somewhere in the north of Holland because I was so tired and I had to get back the other direction. I'd do like 3 street shows and then get back on the plane that night and come back to London.
Wow.
Or I'd stay overnight and then come back the next morning. So I was doing more and more cabaret and less street, but there was still a few times in the year where I would go and do it. And I always loved it because it I don't know, I think it keeps you fresh. I think it's never good to do just one thing, like just to do street performing, just to do cabaret, just to do theatre. I think having a mix of those things keeps you fresh. It keeps it interesting.
Yeah, and then each one informs the other too. You can learn something from each one that you can bring back to it. Like if you've done cabaret for, you know, a long contract and you have a street festival, you might bring something in from what you've learned in that long contract in the cabaret that might work in the show as well.
Yeah, but it's obviously like a changing down of gears as well, because you know, I never swear when I do street shows. And if you're on stage at 11 o'clock at night in London,
yeah, you're letting loose.
Yeah, it would be like, oh, you know, take it down a notch, take it down a notch.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it's weird as well though, because in Europe, you know, you can pretty much do what you want on the street. I don't ever remember a festival organizer coming and telling me off. You know, in Europe, or saying like, don't swear or don't do that, or can you wear something else?
Yeah, or you got a complaint.
In the UK, I mean, it's not been all the time, but in the UK and Australia, I certainly got more. I hate to say it, but there's definitely a sort of more Anglo-Saxon things are. I think it's this idea of family friendly, and I get that, and I respect that. But I did this show briefly for a couple of seasons called Butterfly, and it was based on Madame Butterfly, but it was like this 1980s New York. It was, you know, the soundtrack was all Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And so I sort of transposed the story into 1980s what I imagine 1980s New York culture was, because I'm not quite that old. And I've never been to New York. Can you believe it? I've never been to New York.
Can't believe it.
So the show was like, there was a poll. Remember whenever it had a pole show? So I decided to jump on the bandwagon and I had a pole show, but it was a pole dance that I was doing. But it was such a burlesque, such a buffoonery of pole dancing. So I'd made these massive cartoon boobs made out of foam with little triangles over the nipples, and, you know, my classic squeaker gag, the squeakers in the nipples. And it was so not sexy. So I was in this like regional town in middle of England, like in Middle Earth, and I was doing, and so there I am doing the pole dance, and then I start getting flack off the bloody security guards, and I'm like, oh, excuse me, who made you the critic of the Times? Like who's like, who are you? And then someone from the festival said, look, we've had some complaints. And I was like, well, what is it about the pole dancing? And they were like, so I should mention that at the end of the show, like Madame Butterfly, she gets pregnant. So I sang I Will Always Love You from the top of the pole while giving birth to a baby on a bit of a...
How did you manage that?
So like there's me, with the big, like the a kimono on, and there's the volunteers holding it, and there's the poor bloke that is my love interest. He's sitting at the bottom of the pole looking at me, and I'm singing I Will Always Love You, and they just like I'd released the baby, and the baby was bouncing on this elastic. And so apparently there were some complaints, and I was like, well, what's it about? Is it about the baby? No, not really about the baby. It's about the pole dance. No. Oh, well, yeah, but no. What is it about? And it turned out it was, I don't know if it was one person or several people had complained about the boobs.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, so let me get this straight. If I take the comedy boobs off, I can still do the show. I can still do the pole dance. Yeah, that's fine. So you'd rather see the outline of my real boobs and the massive Simpsons comedy boobs, which are obviously fake cartoons that are parodying the whole sexual thing. Yeah, basically. And I said, no, I'm not doing. So I was doing it for a festival organizer who was working with the town's body. So this guy was like, he's got his own arts organization and they're very liberal on whatever, but he had to work in the constraints of the town. So it ended up being this big debate. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not doing this. I'm not pole dancing. I am not pole dancing for your pleasure, because that, without the boobs, without the tuning it, I'm doing a pole dance. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's worse for these little girls to watch me pole dancing than to watch me, a clown. Clown pole dancing. So the guy was like, the festival organizer was totally cool about it. I said, I'll tell you what I will do. I'll do a whole show about offending people. So I just improvised an hour-long show about have I offended you? And I kept stopping and asking people if I'd offended them. And actually, I mean, for me, it was brilliant, because it was one of the rare chances when you actually get to really, oh God, it sounds so up its own arse, but when you get to really see, culture and morals and values in action. And I was like, if you're offended, why? What offends you?
And what was the audience reaction to that? Were they...
Well, I think all of the people who'd been remotely offended had gone home. I scared them off. So people were offended. But what it meant was that I had this constant... basically, it was an hour-long conversation with the audience about being offended.
Interesting.
So I wish I'd recorded it now, because it would have been a whole, it would have been a whole show.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of, I'm with this thing about offending people. It's like the example of the rape joke. I'm and now with cancel culture, I'm really between the two fences about it, because I do believe in freedom of speech, but I also, don't believe in simply offending people for offence's sake.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, if you're creating a show, you're not creating a show thinking you're going to offend people, because you're creating something that you think is art, and then you find out if you've offended them when you get a complaint. Unless what?
Unless you're dirty Fred.
Yeah. Then you do that on purpose. Yeah, then you don't give a shit. Yeah.
Or Living Space, right, as well, that, because Living Space always loved to push the envelope, didn't he?
Yeah.
And for me, and Stompy and Chris Lynham, that for me, those were always the performers that I gravitated towards. But then I've also seen that stuff get out of control. Do you remember the show that I was doing in Edinburgh, the Office Party?
Oh, yeah.
So that was like a kind of bacchanalian, by the end of the show, no one knew who the performers were and who were the public. And that was the way it was supposed to be, because it was literally the whole carnival.
It was supposed to feel like an office party.
Yeah, but it was supposed to be that thing about, what happens when we add in all this alcohol and take away social controls. And it was, I mean, as an experiment, it worked brilliantly. But, there was this thing in there where we were basically the audience were encouraged to get undressed, and there was a lot of egging people on, and the more naked people got, the more people were clapping and cheering and whooping. But I spent a lot of time in character as Mandy from Accounts with girls in the toilets who'd encouraged too much alcohol, too much peer pressure, had gone too far, whacked their backs out, and then regretted it. And I was like, oh babe, fine. I was trying to soothe them while staying in character. Like, if I had knockers like you, I'd be getting them out. I'd be getting them out in the bakery. I'd be doing it all the time. So yeah, it is. I do believe you can go too far. Well, it's like Love Island. I mean, I don't watch these shows, but was it Love Island where some of the contestants ended up committing suicide because it had all?
Oh, really?
So yeah. So I'm definitely more mindful than I was of not upsetting people just for the sake of pushing the envelope.
Yeah. Do you have any other crazy stories you can think of a street show that went either really good or really bad?
Oh my God, I've got lots of stories. There was one time in Bandcamp. I think I was in Luxembourg or Germany, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe on the border with that weird slither that you're not quite sure if it's Belgium or Germany. And I'd climbed on this bloke to do, and I was doing the whole classic gag of pulling someone's hair and pretending to, and then I'm literally, stood on the guys on the shoulders balancing, and I pulled, and I heard a and I was like, shit, toupee. And he immediately, his hand went up because he was a fairly young bloke, and I felt awful because I'm like, oh my God, he's obviously really, really embarrassed about this. He spent the rest of the show with his hand on his head, but half of the audience had seen it and half hadn't, and they were like,
oh wow.
And then there was another time when I did a benefit show for a friend in Antwerp, and he was in jail in Poland. He was a Cuban guy who has an immigration problem, and so we did this benefit to get him out. And I'd brought this Dutch guy out of the audience, and I was just about to do the candlestick balance on him, and I looked down, and he'd got a little bit excited. And again, half the audience saw it and half didn't.
What did you do?
I was like, Jesus! Like, I was doing this New York character. I was like, you're really happy to be here, and he was like, I was going to do a bad Dutch accent. Now he's like, well, I can't help it. You're very sexy. And he wasn't perturbed at all. But one of the worst experiences I had was in Croatia, and this was maybe 2003. So it's just before Croatia became part of the EU. And I'd started this show. So it was a festival, but on a street pitch, but it's still, people had gone for the show, but it was really streety feel. And at the back of the pitch, there were three guys. They were like Zagreb's answer to Larry Moe and Curly. And they were all laughing. And then one just picked up a bottle, cracked it over the other one's head. There was blood pouring down his face, and then the third one was like, oh, 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 oh. Oh. And I was like, right. So, people are looking at this is happening behind me on a wall behind me. People are looking at that.
How deep are you in your show at this point? Are you just starting?
Yeah, but there's probably like already 50 people gathered because it's a festival, and I can't compete with this behind me. So anyway, I start the show, and just as I've sort of solidified the edge, an ambulance comes through to get the guy who's bleeding. I'm like, okay, we'll just roll with it. Time's not a problem here. We'll just roll with it. And then this elderly lady walked across the pitch, and before I did the thing with the bag, I used to have pool noodles, and how light pool noodles are.
Yeah.
I used to use them to keep my volunteers in order because they make that big thwack, but they don't hurt at all. So this lady, she was walking she walked right through the centre of the stage with her shopping really slowly. Yeah. Okay, right, she needs to move on. So I was gently playing with her, and she was playing with me, and the whole audience were laughing, and I'm like, this is fun. And then she swung her bags at me, comedy style, but they were full of really heavy shopping, and I was but she lost her balance, and she fell over. And I was like, oh shit, this is not good, because I could see she landed really hard on her wrist, and I was like, well, this could be really not good. And the audience started laughing, and I was like, oh, come on, don't laugh at an old lady falling over. That's really not bad. Sorry, elderly woman. And I went to pick her up, and as I went to pick her up, she really started hitting me, because the audience laughed even more. And she eventually, like, she went off, and I was like, oh God, can anything else go wrong in this show? So I carry on the show, and everything seems to be fine. And then just as I'm standing on the two guys' shoulders at the end to do the finale, this huge Croatian policeman rolls up to the edge, folds his arms and looks at me, and he goes, you know, and I'm like, well, and I just know it's something to do with the lady. So I do my hat pitch and mention that maybe people could be generous, because I think I might need a lawyer. I'm saying it jokingly. The policeman at the end of the show takes my passport off of me.
Holy shit.
And so, you know, Croatia's not in the EU at that time. And I'm oh my God, he's taken my passport off me. And I'm like, well, when will I? So obviously he doesn't speak any English. It's all through a translator. When will I get the passport back? And it's like, well, it depends if she presses charges or not.
Wow.
What? Well, she fell over. I didn't do anything. I didn't.
You got witnesses.
Like, you know, oh well, you know, we'll have to see. And I started to think, God, you know, like this seems like a really good way for you guys to get a lot of money out of me. So anyway, but just before I left, I got the passport back. But I was crapping it until I got through passport. I got to the airport, and yeah, it did kind of make me realise how close you can fly, because it was not the first time I've had problems with the city authorities, like all of us. Have you ever been?
Have I been in trouble? Yeah, I've gotten stopped on a bunch of places, like in New York. I can remember this. It was years ago when I could work Central Park, and Clark was living here, and I got to Central Park. It was packed, and he goes, the bad news. He goes, you want the good news or the bad news? I go, what's the good news? He goes, the good news is you're next. I go, what's the bad news? He goes, the breakers just got stopped by the police. I go, well, whatever. I'm not the break dancer, so I'll go, do my show. So I do a show, and right at the end, right when I'm about to collect, the police officer comes up, walks through the crowd, hands me like a note or something. And I just said, it's all right, everybody. Just, you don't be shy. Come on. And so then they're like, of course, booing the police, saying, you got better things to do, all this stuff. So then he comes over, and the note said, you need to stop doing your show. Like, I don't know why he's giving me a note. It was like the dumbest thing ever. So then, yeah, he wrote me out a ticket, partly because I think people were complaining to him so much, that he felt like shit. And so then I had to go to court, and so I just played it up. They said, what are we doing? I said, I was just doing a magic show for the families in the park. And he goes, yeah, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have a permit. I go, all right, I didn't know that I needed to have a permit for that. He goes, yeah, so you got to have 6 months. You have to not, you can't get stopped again. There's no charges are filed or anything. You just can't get caught again in 6 months. I go, no, I won't, of course, because I didn't know that you're not supposed to do that. So I just made sure I didn't do shows on that day that the cop was working, which was like a Sunday. And I just avoided it for 6 months. And that was it. And then I've gotten stopped in other countries where they just shut me down and they say, you can't perform here. You need a permit. And then you either get a permit or you just do it again in another spot. But yeah, I've been stopped a handful of times.
It's worrying, isn't it? The whole public-private space thing. It's all like stuff going on at Covent Garden at the moment. And
I know, it's horrible.
There's always been that battle between the people who, administrate the space. Technically, they kind of lease the space, don't they? And they own it in a way. I was doing a festival in London in Borough Market, and I'd done it the year before, and I was doing it again, and it was great because it was really, so there's an artisanal French market there, and it's Bastille Day, and so it's, I'm able to do a show that I'm really enjoying doing, and speak a bit of French and make some political jokes, and they're all liberal lefties and they're loving it, and they're also all really well off, and they they love to give you it's always notes, not coins, because they like to support the arts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking, oh, this is brilliant. This is because they've given me a little bit of a retainer to be there, but not much. And the deal is, I get to pass the hat for my time. And so I'm like, this is great. And then this really angry looking woman comes over and turns the sound system down. And I'm like, I don't even know who she is. So I'm looking at her and I'm like, I walk over, turn it back up, carry on. She turns it down. I tell and it ends up being this, like, looking at me like she's like she's going to kill me. And she comes up to me at the end and starts telling me, you can't do that. And I'm like, who are you? I work for Borough Market. I'm a manager here. And I'm like, but I'm not working for you guys. I'm working for this, working for this organisation. And she was like, you can't do that. And then she said to me, and you can't pass the hat. So I was allowed to do the shows for the rest of the day, but I was thinking, God, you know what? Like, I would be making so much more money in the hat than I'm making from the fee they've given me. But I didn't want to. The people from the organisation that booked me was so lovely.
Yeah, but they didn't sort it out in advance.
Yeah, but I didn't, and they were really apologetic, and because I didn't want to let them down and the spirit of the day, because so it's like Bastille Day, we'd already voted like idiots, like lemmings, to leave the EU, and so there's this real lovely feeling of EU Remainers and sympathisers, and just London, that it's a cosmopolitan international city, and of course those people want to stay in the EU, so I didn't want to. It felt to me like it wouldn't be in the collaborative, cooperative spirit of the day for me to go, even though I'm like, oh God, I'm like, lost several £100 here because of you.
So frustrating.
But that thing of people not realising that, the public space, the private space thing, because obviously I think, the general public think that we just rock up and they don't realise, what the whole permit process, the whole
what's behind the scenes. So I mean, some places obviously you just rock up and you do shows, like I think like Copenhagen and Amsterdam, although I guess maybe there's a permit system in Amsterdam. I haven't been there in a long time, but it used to just be open. Like lots of places used to be just open. You can just go and do shows and no one bothered you, but now everything is controlled.
And I mean, obviously, that's just so many levels of that being detrimental to society. It sounds, like hyperbole, and it sounds overblown. But for one thing, that people with no money, street theatre. This is why, as well, I hate to keep banging on about Brexit, but I'm going to. That for kids, we used to have a wonderful exchange here with the EU, and so they would bring over, I can't remember the name of that incredible French company, with the mechanical elephant, and so the EU would fund these festivals in poorer places in the UK, and they would get these incredible street shows.
Stuff they'd never see.
Yes, stuff that they'd never seen and they never get to see, and so that's a tragedy as well. But just on a more basic, on a more fundamental level, that not being able to go and see a busker, not seeing a piece of live performance is, and so many kids literally don't. I mean, I think we don't. I don't think about it because my mum and dad did take me to see the ballet. They did take me to pantomime and theatre and musicals. Not all the time, but I went, and thinking how many kids just don't go.
Yeah.
Just go, and especially in more regional places as well. So it is a tragedy. And also, from a larger political perspective, is that, and it takes me way back to what I said about the criminal justice bill, that these I sound like a right anarchist now. Google's going to be hunting me, for the series listening in to, but just that thing of gathering and ownership of space, and oh God, I'm going to say surveillance capitalism. I mean, there's nothing wrong with capitalism per se. Where I'm a businesswoman, you're a businessman. We're all in. I don't do shows for free, but there needs to be, I don't know, I feel like with everything that we're on this dangerous seesaw at the moment. And obviously, like, you know, what's happened in your country recently, terrible. And I would never suggest that public space should be opened up so that it was able to be subject to that kind of assault.
Yeah.
But when you can't simply, and obviously now as well, like, you know, these people gathering to anti-mask protests. I mean, it's just
it's ridiculous.
Using COVID as an example against that. But yeah, I think we really have to be mindful of access to public space and freedom of expression.
Well, yeah, I mean, a couple of things I was thinking when you were saying that is that what's been happening prior to the pandemic with pitches being shut down and all places being privatized and everything and losing space to perform, and then with the pandemic there being no street performing. I mean, I think there's some people doing it some places, but I feel like it's going to be harder to get it back to anywhere where it was before because of the absence of it for so long.
Yeah.
That being said, though, here in New York, they started something called Open Streets, Open Stage, something. Anyway, it's this program that's going to start in, I think, March, because we have these streets that they call open. There's streets called open streets, which are closed streets. So outside where I live out here, our street, we're right next to a park. Our street is closed to only to residential traffic. So we set up barriers and the signs, and there's a bunch of streets all over the city. I forget how many miles of streets, but there's a lot. And what they're trying to do is utilize those open spaces for performances, for, like, you know, not necessarily street performers, but like Broadway performers or anything, just where people can apply to do a performance in these spaces, utilizing these open spaces to help the artists that haven't been working put their art on the street for people. So it could be, you know, obviously street performers. Like when there's an application, I'll apply and see what that looks like. But, you know, they're not necessarily the most crowded streets. Like I couldn't do a show on my block here. I mean, I did one in my park on a Sunday because Sunday's a farmer's market, and I didn't gather a crowd like a normal street show. It's this big field, and people just set up blankets, and I just started doing a show, and people stopped to watch. But I just think it's a nice idea what New York is doing as far as that, like trying to bring like live entertainment back and bring it out in the streets where anyone can enjoy it. But I don't think that's happening everywhere. And I think it's a really unique thing because of the fact that we started doing these open streets so that people had more room to move around, socially distanced, that it's great that they're coming up with this idea to utilize that. It'd be nice if that was happening other places, like realizing with the pandemic is let's open those private spaces to artists to gather crowds in a safe way and work again.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Like street shows, out of the performances that could take place during the pandemic, like street theatre is perfect. And
except when you're using volunteers.
Yeah, but I absolutely like that not possible.
And but, also, you know, we don't want to pull your crowd in.
Yes, so busking would be more difficult, obviously, but in terms of, you know, city councils or festival bodies or whatever being able to gather people in, because in the summer I did some shows with Lost in Translation Circus, and they've got this beautiful circus tent, and those shows were able to go ahead because they just had the sides off, and they could obviously, you know, really strictly monitor where people were sitting, but it wouldn't take a great deal. I mean, because I don't really see, sadly, I don't see, you know, COVID being fully over until past the summer. I mean, who knows? I mean, I want to touch wood or something, but who knows? But also, I mean, oh God, I sound like a right doomsayer, but that it is, when this is over, is this the end of this, or is this just the beginning of pandemics? I hope not, but either way, that, you know, I'm surprised that there's not a little bit more, because it wouldn't be that difficult for city bodies, like, you know, just like draw a chalk circle. We know chalk circles, you just draw it where people can stand, and that, because one thing, I mean, I think once this is over, the pandemic, that there will be a huge boom in entertainment. It will just be, you know, like the 1920s after the Spanish flu.
Yeah, people are hungry for it.
And that's why, though, busking is so beautiful, isn't it? Like if you can find a space to go out and you're not going to get hassled and you can just set up and do a show. In a way, I think it's the purest art form in the world. It's the purest, certainly the most economically viable, depending on if you're allowed to do it. And yeah, I don't know. But obviously that it all comes down to money at the end of the day, doesn't it? And so with if something can't be monetized, that I mean, what isn't monetized anymore?
Yeah.
So we all look at like Facebook, the days when Facebook first started. Now there's more and more adverts, and even in your if you don't use a private email address, you're constantly being bombarded. And so I guess in a way street theatre is just going to be like that, because if the space can't be monetized, so in the case of Covent Garden, the people who pay in a lot of money to rent those units and run those cafes and bars, they every person to them is a money sum, aren't they? And so while they're watching your show, they're not drinking, they're not eating, even though we would say, well, people come to see us, they throw a couple of coins in our hats, and then they come and spend a lot more money in your establishment.
And they leave happy, and they're going to be happier, and they're going to spend. But that's not people's perception. The market's perception is that, like you said, they're taking money away from the stores. Like performers are doing these shows, and no one's shopping at my store. Well, maybe it's because your store is shit, not because of the performers out there. It's nothing to do that they don't correlate. Performers are there, which is bringing more people, which is making people happy, and they're going to go out and spend money and spend more time in this space. But unfortunately, that's not what's seen by the people who run these spaces.
And I mean, I guess philosophically as well, busking represents a threat, doesn't it, to the perfect capitalist model, because busking is so independent and self-contained, and it doesn't rely on, okay, like you buy an amp or whatever, or you buy costumes, and but essentially we're self-contained, and we're not, where the cafe's reliant on the council is reliant on the management company, where you can just rock up and do it. So I don't know what the answer is, but I hope that there's a space after this pandemic and places to gather, and yeah.
Well, Abby, we're not going to save the world in one conversation, are we?
No, but we can try.
We can try. I have one last thing I want to ask you, because I have to go get my son at school soon. But a question I kept thinking about earlier, even though that was a really nice place to end it, because we said some really nice things. But
I don't know now what I'll. I'm 50 in March, so I was thinking, will I have one last hurrah? Will I do one last retrospective of street shows and characters I've done?
You should do them all in one show.
Yeah. Will I just focus on my book, Brian, which we didn't talk about? Oh yeah,
let's talk about. I meant to. Yeah, I was gonna segue into your book when we were talking about Hodge's book, but yeah, let's talk about your book before we go.
Doing It, which is my first novel, out in March, and will be available in hard copy, and will probably be on Amazon, or I'll put it on my Facebook page. I might even link to the Buskers page if I'm allowed to do that. So yes.
Yeah, what's it called?
My book. It's called Everybody's Doing It.
And what's it about?
Sadly, it's not about street performing, but there's quite a lot of the London cabaret circuit in there. Obviously it's all fiction, but anyway, it's about this woman. She's not, and this is not personal. She's divorced, she's a flailing actress, she's childless, she's single, and she's about to turn 39, and she's like, right, you know what, by the time I'm 40, I'm going to be married and I'm going to be pregnant. And so she starts off on this quest. Of course, like cue lots of internet dating and But it's really a story about a woman and her friendship circle. And I started writing it 8 years ago, and I had a really literary agent, and we had a parting of the way. So now I've got an independent guy publishing it, which I'm really glad about. And the one good thing about the hiatus is that it's allowed me to go back and rewrite the thing and change it and make it much more diverse.
Right.
So, yeah.
Congratulations. Cool. All right. Yeah, we'll definitely we'll put a link to it on this when this episode goes up, even if I can always add it afterwards so people can find it. That's awesome. There's another Dana Smith is also an author. He's an American. I mean, I think he's performed internationally, but he's an old school street performer, and he's written several novels as well. So I think it's just like it's another way to be creative, another way to have a creative outlet.
Well, the good thing about the writing is obviously it's, pandemic proof to a degree, although not if people don't buy your book. But this book, I was so obsessed with writing when I first started. Actually, I had a little tour in Sweden, and I was sitting in the back of the rental car, on the laptop on the way to gigs. And I kind of regret it now. I was so antisocial because, bumping into people like Katie Wright, not Miss Dynamite. Seen a really sorry, Katie. I'm just in the middle of this.
At the finish this chapter.
Yeah, because I was obsessed. Sorry, I know I've not seen you for 5 years, but I've just got, yeah.
Everyone understands.
Well, it's good to speak to you, Brian.
Yeah, so good to see you. Yeah, thank you for being part of the project and telling your stories and sharing your wisdom.
I'm honoured because I've always thought of myself as the world's worst busker.
No.
Because I was never any good at passing the hat until Nigel, Mr. Spin, taught me some psych tricks.
Uh-huh.
And I tell you what, Nigel could set up a business on teaching people to pass the hat.
Oh yeah, he's done that with a bunch of people.
Yeah, right. His mum's a psychologist, and because obviously, he made massive hats because he's a great performer. But I was like, Nigel, how do you? And he's like, Abby, it's just science. And Nigel's like, I talk about money all through my show, and I was like, what? No, you don't. He's like, yes, I do, Abby. When I ask the audience to clap and I say, so depending where he was, if he was in Australia, he'd be go, come on, I want a 10. That's a 5. I don't want 5. Come on, I want everybody, energy, I want 10. And so obviously, I guess if he was somewhere like Japan, he'd be like 100, I want 100%. But he'd basically tailor those messages all the way through. And I did employ his techniques, and I have to say it did make a big difference in my hat. So
yeah, there you go.
But newbies.
Well, but you you definitely are a big part of the history of our world. So it doesn't matter that you didn't make money in the hat. You've done lots of shows, and I think you've influenced more people than you realize.
Aww. Well, and I have to say, it's like I was thinking today before talking to you about, all the people I've bumped into all over the world. I was at a festival in Spain, in Barcelona, all on my own. And, I was walking down the street and it was a lovely night. And I was thinking, oh, this is great. But if only I saw someone I knew. And then coming the opposite direction was Trent the Birdman.
What?
I went, Trent, and I ran down the street. She jumped on him like a monkey. And he went, Abby.
That's incredible.
Seeing people we know all over the world, and seeing the Chipolatas, when Jasper was still around in Japan, and just thinking so many happy memories and fun times, and hopefully there's more to come, but really a global family and lifelong friendships. And also what's funny though is when was the last time we spoke?
I don't know.
I'm not sure if I've seen you since Edinburgh 2008.
Is that when it was?
Well,
or Stockholm maybe?
Yeah, Stockholm. Okay, so was that maybe, I think that was 2012, but it's a fair whack of time. Yeah, probably Stockholm, but just everybody is still the same.
Yeah, and there's no, we caught up a little bit before we started, but it's just you're back onto it.
Yeah.
Back in it, because it is this global family, like you said. And if any one of us was anywhere in the world and we ran into each other, you'd be back right in where you left off the last time.
Yeah, literally picking up from the last conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really hope that, that more people come on board, because the one thing I did notice is that, with things seem to be becoming more professional. And I don't know about you, but I noticed like the party aspect of festivals started to disappear. And I was like, well, I get it, because you're a really high skilled circus artist, and obviously you can't have a hangover if you're going to those 25 plates on a tightrope, with razor blades balanced on your head and a unicycle spinning on your foot. I mean, that's going to be difficult with a hangover. But I always kind of felt like the hang and the party was an essential part of what we do, because just about people getting pissed. People would talk about ideas and politics and shows or people, or it just, it's that it was the grit. It was the grit. It was the salt, the umami. What way do I sound like? But it was that that tang that made us who we were, and made people like Living Space go out and do crazy stuff. And talking to you about Nigel, your character, and before you'd started doing the show, and just how much fun it was to talk about ideas and show ideas, and that people could be a pain on the pitch, obviously, because it could be done literally, but people could also be incredibly generous with tips and ideas and punchlines. And so let's hope that carries on.
I know. I hope so.
And on that note,
thank you so much, Abby. It's awesome.
Really good to speak to you, and great to see you.
Thank you for giving me such a good time.
Here's to hoping that in the near future we can get back to that all-important hang after a day of shows. Guess what? Did you notice? We've got a brand new logo! It was designed by Jeff Ritchie, and you can find him on Instagram at FredPaints23. I'll have a link to his website in the episode notes. New logo also means new merchandise. And I'll have a link to our online shop in the episode notes. Surf on over and have a look at how you can proudly display the logo while at the same time supporting the podcast. We get a little bit off each purchase. Speaking of supporting the podcast, why not consider being a sponsor? If you'd like to, or know someone who would, contact me at magic@buskerhalloffame.com. You can also visit the Busker Hall of Fame website and throw a little love into our online hat by clicking on the donate button, or become a sustaining supporter of this project at patreon.com/Busker Stories. Music for this podcast came from 357 Lover. Links to both songs are available in the notes section of this episode on the Busker Hall of Fame website. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. If you enjoy the podcast, please tell a friend about it and leave us a 5-star review. It'll help get the podcast noticed, and we'd really appreciate it. If you'd like someone to be interviewed or feel a certain voice has not been heard, please reach out to me and let me know. We're doing our best to capture interviews and stories with as many performers as we possibly can. It's up to you to help fill in the gaps. So on behalf of myself and the rest of the team of the Busker Hall of Fame, remember, if you can't laugh at yourself, find someone else and laugh at them. And also check out the merch. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.